attempt to record.
Try.
Let me see if I can also turn that on. I'm not sure whether mine's recording or not, but we'll give it a shot. Take it away.
Are people seeing the window with the MetroWorks, the owl, where the table? Oh,
yeah, but you haven't started screen sharing yet, right?
I can see it. No, I haven't. Yeah, I can see it on my little screen, but not the big screen. But that's okay because we can see each other in person on those of us who are here.
That's why if you do speaker view, it'll always pop up. So whoever's
there we go. Okay, we got the technology. It's always we'll have it down by next week.
Don't ask me for help.
So I don't know. Last week I was the host and I introduced people. Are you going to introduce me or do I introduce myself? Does everybody know me?
What? I'm sorry. I thought you had introduced yourself. I mean, this morning we have the esteemable Martin Kessel coming to talk about not one but 2 trips to the Amazon. How's that for an introduction?
That's a great introduction. Yeah, thank you. I have to credit Bill Ramage. Several months ago, he talked about his trip, a portion of which was on the Amazon, and I got like, oh yeah, I started thinking about mine and just like kept having things I wanted to share with people. So now I got a chance to do it. And we talked about like the tour companies that we've been on and ones we want to recommend. So just to make sure I get it, I put my shirt on. Bio and the expert. That was the first tour company that we used, and highly recommend it.
They were amazing, actually. So I second it.
I guess I've always been fascinated with the rainforest and the Amazon in particular, and a couple of superlatives that I've learned over the years. In terms of biodiversity, maybe 1/3 of all species on the earth are represented in the Amazon. Both the size of the Amazon rainforest and the density of different species is kind of mind-boggling. In terms of water, more water than any other river. Matter of fact, the next 7 rivers combined, the Amazon has the flow of that, and maybe 20% of all the fresh water in the world goes through the Amazon. I just learned recently in terms of trees and carbon storage. I know, the whole climate change thing is interesting. Trees are important, but I never realized until last year that all trees are not created equal. So I'm going to share something from National Geographic, and then I'll probably keep sharing. If this works. And there we go. You got it. Okay, it looks small on the big screen, but I can read it. This is on the National Geographic website just last year. And you can see the tropical rainforests in the world. And the caption reads, humid tropical rainforests in particular play a pivotal role in stabilizing the global climate. They cover just 6% of the Earth's land surface, yet store more than half of the world's carbon locked inside plant matter. However, these forests are increasingly under stress. And the statistic I've seen elsewhere and kind of verified by the map is that of all the tropical rainforests, the Amazon is half of those. So in terms of carbon storage, that would technically, I guess, be 1/4 of all of the carbon storage. So whenever you hear about people in Brazil burning down, a few acres here and a few acres there, it's just devastating to the whole ecosystem. Can we go forward? And you should see a screen of the overview of the Amazon basin. Not all of this is necessarily rainforest, most of it is. So you see it pretty much goes from the Atlantic Ocean almost with 100 miles of the Pacific Ocean, just because of where the continental divide is. So when Bill was here before, he talked about his trip from the Atlantic on a cruise up to Manaus. And I think you can see the pointer there, which is just really a fraction of the way up. The next major city, if you go up the Amazon, is Iquitos, which is in Peru. And that's where we went on our second Amazon trip. And then from there, it branches off to some of the real headwaters. The first trip that we went on was based in Cusco. Cusco, as you may know, is kind of the tourist capital of Peru. Was also the capital of the Inca Empire, and it's the starting place where people begin their trips to Machu Picchu, which is just down a bit. So from Cusco is actually on one of the Amazon tributaries itself, but the one that we were going on was on the Madre de Dios River, which is Manu National Park. This was on our first trip. And, excuse me, looks like it's very close. It looks like from Cusco to the Madre de Dios is just a stone's throw away. And in terms of distance, that's true, but there happens to be a mountain range in between. So where my cursor is pointing is basically a divide between different sub-basins of the Amazon. And you have to go over a mountain range to get to the Manu National Park, which tends to have some interesting effects because the weather, which goes from east to west, is stopped by the mountain range. Clouds are stopped there, creating a cloud forest. And then you've got the tropical rainforest on the east side, and the west side is pretty dry. So if you've been to Machu Picchu or Cusco, or you've even seen pictures, you see it's pretty arid on the left side, on the west side. And then you've got the rainforest on the right side. So in fact, the Amazon basin, which you see in this, is not 100% rainforest, but most of this area is rainforest. So I guess another one of the superlatives that I found impressive about the Amazon is just how big it is. Basically from, this is about half the continent of South America. And it's pretty much kind of wilderness. Not all, of course, there are some cities, but you can basically go from the Pacific to the Atlantic and not go through a city if you try hard enough. If you go down the Amazon itself, there's not a single bridge, not a single dam, unlike the Charles River, for example. It's basically pretty wild.
Yeah.
So the first trip that we went on actually originated, Bev is here, of course, and our son actually took a trip to Peru and was telling our family about it. And before long, we had 7 people in the family, Bev and my family, who wanted to go to Machu Picchu. And we arranged a trip. And of those 7, I was absolutely not going to go to Peru without also getting to the rainforest. We finally had 4 of the 7 of us are going to continue our trip on into the rainforest to Manu National Park. So this is the company we chose, is the one I have the short for, Bio-Andean Expeditions, and they put together this trip. And Manu National Park has its own superlatives. It's under contention for the most biodiversity of any particular one park in the world. There are other contenders as well. But in terms of birds, it's pretty much unexcelled. There's more birds than any other place. More birds in this park than in the United States, the entire United States. Though honestly, that was impressive to me, but I can't even name the birds in my backyard, much less than the United States. But I was still impressed, and I was going to see as many as I could when I got there. Okay, so this trip that we took, you see Cusco on the lower left is the starting point. We go through some normal roads, then we go up the mountain range, down the mountain range. The profile is 4,000 meters at the opening of the park, and then 400 meters when we get to the Madre de Dios River when it's actually navigable. So all the way from 4,000 down to 400 meters, you can translate that into feet, but it's quite a drop. So we go through this light green zone, which is called the cultural zone. That's fairly open. It's preserved for development, but people can live there, and there's lots of unlimited tourism there. And then because we booked a long trip, we booked a 6-day trip, we got to go into the reserve zone, which is much more limited in terms of tourism. And we got one of the few companies, there's only about 6 or 7 companies that are authorized to go in there with a limited number of people. So we got into the reserve zone, stayed there a few days, and then came back. Yeah, okay. So here we are with our van on the border of the new national park. Everything we had was in this van. On the roof, there's a spare tire. There's also fresh water that we'd need for 6 days. There is fuel for the boat that we're going to be taking and for the cooking. All the food that we're going to need. All our luggage is also stuffed into the van. And
Martin, how big was your group besides the people from your family?
Yeah, good question. We thought it was going to be like a big tour, but our group was 4 people. It was, once they found out we wanted to go, they opened it up to anyone else, but nobody else showed up. So it's basically Bev and me, our son Nathan, and our nephew Teo.
Nice.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
And there were 4 staff members for the 4 tourists.
So 8 people in that van plus all your luggage and supplies?
Not 8 yet. Some of them popped in at the port when we started the boat. But when we got to the boat, there were 4 staff people. There was a boat driver, there was a boat assistant cook, there was a chef, and there was the tour guide. So basically 4 and 4, which is a pretty good ratio. And for what we got, we didn't pay that much. $1,000 a person was kind of the best deal we've ever had. Here's our guide, Ronald, which is showing us the map at the entrance for the national park. And here's another view, a profile view, showing the peak, the 4,000 meter peak, then going down to 400 meters, rather treacherous descent, which we'll see in a second. Where you see a little river, that's where we get into the boat. That's where the Madre de Dios becomes navigable and basically stays navigable for 4,000 miles till you get to the Atlantic. It shows some of the different little villages you're going to see, and typical. And then they show some wildlife that we didn't see necessarily those exact things. So this is the cloud forest, pretty dramatic. So again, the clouds go, the prevailing winds are from the Atlantic out to the Pacific. They get caught by this mountain peak. They stop, and we're in a permanent cloud. Basically, it creates its own ecosystem. It's a different ecosystem than the lower rainforest, but equally as biodiverse. And then this is kind of the descent. You can sort of barely see one of the switchbacks. A little dangerous switchbacks that we would go up and down. And equally interesting is the little stream. So starting at the top, you can see it down here, down there, and then eventually gets down. And you take enough of those little streams, and eventually you get the entire, the headwaters of the Madre de Dios, and then you multiply that by 1,000, and you get the entire Amazon. You can just picture all this water coming from all these different directions, creating the Amazon. And then there's this waterfall is one of those places where the stream is coming down. So our first stop in the cloud forest was for looking at birds. You notice that the tourists and the staff equally were interested in looking for birds. We're all looking out there. I had the actually beginner's luck of finding the first bird, which is the one up in the upper left, and I've labeled it. Yeah, the blue crowned, I can't see it on my screen, blue crowned, whatever it's mannequin. So I checked these all out carefully with the bird book as well as what our guide told us. And then the one we were actually looking for, the Andean cock of the rock on the bottom, is the national bird of Peru, and that appears only in the cloud forest. So looking down, this is the beginning of the Madre de Dios River. So you may recall from the map, the Madre de Dios goes in the Madeira, with the Madeira in its own right is one of the largest rivers in the world, and that goes into the Amazon, kind of just past Manaus, and then goes the rest of the way to the Atlantic. So this is pretty much the spot at which it becomes navigable. So as we get to the little port town, we get fitted for our rubber boots. So whenever we go to dry land, the land is never totally dry, of course. We have to have our rubber boots, so we bring those with us. And then we aboard the boat. So this is our boat that we were on for 6 days. Actually 5 days. This is starting the second day. And then we're off. We're off down the river. Amazingly enough, the Javier, the chef, within a half hour of getting on the boat, comes up with these freshly baked crepes. We have no idea how he cooked them on the boat. They were incredibly good, and actually vegan version and non-vegan version, because we had diversity of the people with us. He had both. So you can see Bev on the left, me in the center, and Teo, my nephew, on the right. And I guess Nathan, our son, was taking the picture. Every once in a while, there's no like ferry service or shuttle service on the river, and this is what people need to get around. So every once in a while, our boat would take passengers on, people who happen to need a ride somewhere, or even cargo. So here's some plantains that are somehow being put on the boat. And then there are 3 people who are coming on as passengers. You can see them sort of in the back. In this case, it happens to be the family of our boat driver, but it could have been anybody that needed a ride. And this is what the boat looks like, kind of fully populated. So in the front is Ronald, the guide. And in the very back is the rest of the crew, the boat driver. We have Javier, the chef, and Lucio, I got his name somewhere. Lucio. Yeah, Lucio is the kind of jack of all trades. He helped navigate the boat. He sometimes had to move the boat with a large stick to get it to go the right direction. And he also was sous chef. And he also helped us with our luggage, basically did everything. But he didn't speak English, it didn't really matter. He could communicate.
Martin, how smooth were the waters, or how tippy was that boat? It looks tippy to me, but I'm not a boat person.
Well, no, it was pretty smooth, pretty smooth.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then we got my son on the left, Bev just peeking out of her behind Nathan, and then Teo, our nephew, and 3 passengers sort of in the middle. And then all the stuff that used to be on the roof, all the fuel, all the food, all the supplies, is sort of in the middle of the boat, plus all of our personal luggage is in there somewhere, I don't know where, but it all fits somehow. So as we're going down the river, we see some of the birds in the sky. This is a lot of vultures and so forth, just flying overhead. And Ronald would identify them all.
Whoa.
What's that? Some shorebirds that we would see along the side. And then the ever-present caimans. They were all over the place. So related to alligators, and these the 2 varieties, I don't need to caption them because they're easy to identify. There's the black caiman and there's the white caiman. And again, they're all over the place. So we took the first boat ride. We had a really long day, and we wanted to get all the way to the reserve zone. And here we are, kind of after sunset, arriving in the reserve zone. And this is the Machugenga Lodge. So this is looks kind of a typical rainforest lodge. There's 2 bedrooms here, I believe, and then there's some other buildings, more bedrooms and dining. So the Machugenga are really interesting because that's the indigenous tribe that lives in this area in the national park. And there's a bit of a tension because they want to pursue their traditional lifestyle, which involves a lot of hunting, but because of the incredible biodiversity, the country really wants to limit hunting, which is going to really be cut down on one species that upsets the whole balance of other species. So they're trying to let these people live as normal life as they can without impinging on the biodiversity. So they've basically offered them a lodge that they can populate and help with and run as part of as an economic tool. So they actually run the Machugenga people run that lodge, and then they show us a lot of their lifestyle during the day. So here's their crafts. They have a little crafts. One of the women on the right is one of the artists. You got the bags, you got jewelry, which we bought, and some baskets, which we couldn't quite figure out how to transport back. They showed us their kind of the native way of creating fire with rubbing sticks. And then they have a particular kind of bow and arrow that they create. They use for hunting. We did it with fruit. We shot fruit. So they're showing us their archery. And then then they play. They love. This isn't really one of their indigenous habits, but they love soccer. They wanted to play soccer with anybody who comes by. So they would do that. So it was interesting what our guide told us about the indigenous people. But then when the moment we got home, our mail was waiting for us. We have National Geographic 2016. They have this feature article on the Manu National Park, one of the most biodiverse places on Earth, and its tension with the Machu people, and how that balance is going to be played out. And I'll put a link to this if you're interested. And among that, of course, we have one of the archery, the bow and arrow, is featured. So on the early morning when we were out in the reserve zone, we went out to look for one of the landmark species. It's called the keystone, one of the keystone species that defines the river, which is the giant river otters. So we were on a search for giant river otters. We landed our boat in this place where there's a little lake, and we came as walking through the rainforest. This is kind of almost the iconic view of the jungle here. That's a medicinal fig tree with this really distinctive look.
Ooh,
Founding.
wow.
And then we came across howler monkeys. We didn't come across monkeys very much on this trip, but these are howler monkeys, and I think the video will play.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if there's any sound. There's not much to listen to, but they were scurrying around.
So, Martin, I know in some of the national parks in this country, some of the animals, like the bears, come right up to the tourists, and that's a problem. Do you see any of that in the Amazon with any animals you encountered?
No,
They
you don't.
weren't tried.
Actually, no, the rescue centers are a different matter because they interact there. But other than that, there's a real desire to keep them separated. You don't have the volume of tourists you'll have in our national parks, for one thing. But there's a real desire to not go close to them. There's been problems in Brazil where people get too close, and they're having problems with changing the lifestyles of the animals and kind of harming the animals. Peru is doing a much better job than Brazil, particularly here, I would say. So we went to this Cacha, I guess you'd call it, which is, in this case at least, it's a body of water that was connected to the river that's now separated. I think you can sort of see that. And that's where we're going to look for the giant river otters. So we got on this separate boat because, again, it's not connected. Our big boat wouldn't go there. And two of the guys are paddling, and we're going on a very slow boat to try to look for the giant river otters. In the process, we see some other things as well. Kokoi heron is related to our very own, literally the one that's in our backyard, the great blue heron. And then the neotropical corant is related to a lot of our other corants we've seen in Florida. But I believe they're basically, these species are unique to Peru. And then some swallows were just kind of pretty. And then the Hoatzin. This is almost like the endemic bird that you see pictures of all the time. It almost represents the Amazon. It's once you see it, you can't forget it. It's like unkempt hair. And it's got other characteristics. It's known as a stinky bird because it digests its food in a very strange way. It's kind of more like a cow in the way it digests raw leaves. It takes like all of its time to digest. It really doesn't have much time to fly, and then it becomes very stinky as well. So, but it's very pretty to look at, I must say. So then finally, we actually took two trips from the lodge out to this lake to look for the giant river otters. Finally, in the last trip, we found these giant river otters, and I got a video. This happened to be where they're, I believe, creating their new nest, if they remember their new home.
How giant is giant? How big are these guys?
Oh, they're not that giant. I would say, I don't know, actually 6 feet,
Pretty big.
5 feet.
Bigger than we have domestically here.
No,
No, it is bigger.
it is bigger.
Yeah. way
Yeah.
bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think these were the babies and they were smaller, but yeah,
Oh, okay.
the adults, I think you're right, were close to 6 feet maybe.
And then at night we took a trip, and this qualifies as the most amazing animal we saw, I must say. So these are the.
Oh.
I thought it looks like the video.
Leaf cutter ants.
These are the leaf cutter ants,
Oh.
and they can form a line, maybe a quarter-mile long, going to their nests. They can take apart all the leaves on a giant tree. There are I'll give one more video and then I'll talk a little more about it. Here's one more video. This.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I think you said they can take down a tree in a night, didn't they?
Yeah, basically because of numbers. Between 1 and 8 million of these people are in these people. They seem like people of these creatures can be in a nest, and they are really kind of beyond belief. So there's E.O. Wilson. I read a lot about him, and he got the. He's kind of a spokesperson for biodiversity, but he also is an expert in ants, and he got the Pulitzer Prize with this co-writer on a book called The Ants. He did an entire book on the leafcutter ants, so I learned a bit about it. Get my notes here. So the leafcutter ants have been around 50 million years or so, and they do not eat the leaves themselves. This is what I thought at first. They do not eat the leaves. They use those for farming, for little agriculture, where they create fungus and they eat the fungus. So we've been doing agriculture, humans, for 10,000 years. They've been doing it for 50 million years. We've had cities. Like of 1 million people since the Roman times. They have cities of upwards of 1 million people, 1 million ants. You call them people, but they're ants. Up to 8 million, in fact, which would be the population in New York City. And the nests can go 100 feet across. They're monumentally large. And then also, along with that, the huge cities, they have a division of labor, which is almost human as well. So they have the large ants do the cutting and then the carrying. They also have some even larger ants that are soldiers, permanent soldiers, and there's also some reserve soldiers that can be recruited if they're attacked. There are also, of course, the farmers who take care of the agriculture. There's others who create the nests. There's others who clean out the nests, remove the garbage, and there's others who tend to the nursery and the queen and the babies. They basically evolved into many, many different lines, basically all from the same queen, but doing totally different functions. So, and the complexity of the society kind of almost rivals human society. It's unbelievable.
And they do all of this with no politician ants, as I understand.
Yeah, there's a queen, and I guess she's the dictator. I'm not sure. Exactly.
All right. Wow.
And then this is a capo or a cebet tree, which it was even bigger than the giant fig that we saw earlier. It's the biggest tree we saw. And then the most notable thing about this particular company was the food. Now Javier was the expert. They gave us their best chef because they knew we had finicky eating habits. So here's Javier, I guess would be the pronunciation. This is like a typical meal. Basically, the number of courses is limited only by the number of trays that they could carry on the expedition. And then Lucio was helping. Here we got the entire crew. We got our guide as well. So every evening and sometimes during the day, we would have this huge selection of food there. And he would also really be into creating artwork. He would, I think a zucchini, was it a zucchini or a cucumber or something? He would make birds out of a different bird each time out of his zucchini. So we were warned, we were, as you remember, where the place where the Madre de Dios got navigable, but we were warned that the water was a bit low, and on the way back, we may not be able to get back without pushing the boat. So basically, I think Bev and I were we were over 60. We were exempt from having to push, but the entire crew plus the kids were. Somehow the videos got pushed upside down here. I'm sorry, but anyway, I don't know what happened with that. Yeah, it was right side up before, but anyway, you can see that we're pushing the boat. They're pushing the boat, and basically we didn't make it back in time. And then basically reverse of the trip over, we're now loading up the van with everything from the boat, and we take our last little trip back to Cusco. Okay. So that is the end of our first trip. I'll stop sharing for a second, and if there's any questions on that, or I can kind of introduce the second trip at the same time.
Martin, I'm disappointed that you didn't give the photos and the videos from the
Rescue Center.
I'm sorry?
From the Rescue Center?
From the, yeah, there was a really nice, it was just past where the park had been, just outside of that area. There was a rehabilitation rescue center where they rehabilitated and released the animals into the wild when they could. But those that couldn't became very, very used to people and interacted with them. And it was, some of the photos and videos are really fun. So next time you'll have to do that one.
Yeah, well, I thought about it. Actually, I do have a couple at the very end, but I was trying to be, I was sort of trying to be a purist here, and show all just animals in the wild. It's really a lot easier to see the animals in a zoo or in a rescue center and get a lot closer and they interact. But from a purist point of view, there's something I think really more thrilling about seeing them just where they are in their own habitat. So I was trying to just in this presentation show just that. And then a bit later, I do have a couple from the rescue center. And I think Carrie has a hand up.
Yeah, Carrie?
No, I can't wait to go back and watch the whole thing from the beginning. It's quite interesting. I was wondering, it's funny, before you mentioned, I was wondering if you'd been to Madre de Dios. I went there for a little while when I was in Peru like 20 years ago, but I was expecting, because I had heard there was one of the most abundant diversity of wildlife there, especially in birds. And when I was there, it was like conspicuously absent of birds and stuff. Did you see?
Yeah, well, this is all on the Madre de Dios. There's also a sub-river, the Manu River. Yeah, this whole trip was all on that.
Okay.
I don't know, were you in the Manu National Park? Were you in one of the? There's actually a second national park there as well. I don't know if you were in either of those.
We had taken a bus from Arequipa over to Lake Titicaca and Puno there, and then we got up to just a small time in Madre de Dios area. So I certainly had the same exposure that you did, but I just hardly saw birds at all, which was just shocking.
I think we were in a very different area. We were closer to Cusco.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I think you could have been on the edge of the rainforest, not actually in the midst of it, maybe.
Entirely possible. Okay.
Martin, I had a question about the road. Did you say the part you traveled by van was the part that went from 8,000 meters to 800 meters and then 4,000 and then back up? Yeah. Yeah. Was it all dirt did you have steep grades and so forth? It would look like a potentially treacherous road.
It wasn't that steep. You saw there was a switchback. It was manageable, but again, the thing about switchbacks is you gotta don't go too close to the edge. Yeah, it was not. It was manageably steep. Yeah, with the switchbacks. I personally would not want to do the driving.
So what season? Sorry, what season did you go in, and what was the climate like when you went? You must have gone from the altitude to a different temperature down below.
I think it was June.
Yeah, well, Cusco is unbelievably cold. It gets down to like 40 or 50 at night. And the rainforest was like 80, 70. It was like 80 at night, kind of like here in the summer.
And was this?
Did you go?
doesn't really matter what time of year because it's on the equator, so it's the same
But
temperature.
I think it was June, wasn't it?
June 1st,
How
yeah,
long-
June was the first.
How many
trip, and
years ago was it, Martin?
It was 2016, June.
Okay,
2016.
thank you.
So after that trip, eventually after 3 years, I really got the urge to go again, go to the rainforest again. Bev, we had a little discussion. Bev said, "Oh, we've been there, done that already. We don't need to go again." We can never really top that first trip. So I checked the calendar and I realized that, gee, my 70th birthday is coming up. Do I get to choose where I go for my 70th birthday? And she finally said, "Yeah, I guess you do."
Chuck E. Cheese, right?
This was not a unique idea, apparently. When we were on the second trip, there was somebody else who was celebrating his 65th birthday. So right, almost one after the other there. So I guess it's the thing to do. So we wanted to do something different, not the exact same trip. So there's other models of visiting the Amazon other than this going from one lodge to the other in a small boat. One of them is you can take kind of a cruise boat. And I don't mean like a cruise ship, but there are boats from Iquitos and from Manaus that maybe carry 30 people in these, maybe 8 cabins or so. We looked at that, but by then I had recruited 5 people for my destination birthday celebration, and that was going to get a bit expensive. And we realized there was another model we could use that we could afford to go a lot longer than taking that little cruise boat, which is basically stay at one lodge and use that as our base of operations to get tours from the lodge. So that's the model we used. And we looked at different companies that did that. And I wanted to go to Iquitos this time to get a different part of the Amazon. In other words, Iquitos, as you remember, is basically where the two small rivers form the Amazon itself. The Amazon name starts at Iquitos. And I found this a company called, I have my notes and I'll get it. Amazonia Expeditions is the name of the second company, and that's owned by somebody named Paul Beaver. And the attraction of that, I did a lot of research. He was trained as a biologist, so his interest is in preserving the biodiversity, exploring it, really learning more about it, preserving as much habitat as possible, doing research. One of his facilities has a research facility. And he also promotes respect for animals, doesn't want people to get too close to the animals. And then he also has an affiliated group called Angels of the Amazon, which provides services to the indigenous people who live along near the lodge, the people who live along the river. So that's what we went for. And I'll share the second half of the trip here, the second part of the trip.
Martin's looking that up. What's interesting about Iquitos is it's a city of it was at least 200,000 people back then. There's 2 ways to get there, by boat and by plane. There's no roads that lead into it. It's in the rainforest.
That is totally true. Yeah, it's known as the largest city that's not accessible by road. So this is the brochure from the second company, Amazonia Expeditions. Iquitos is up at the top. Let's see. So look, here's the Amazon River, a little hard to identify. The Amazon itself is here. And then the Tahoyahua is a very tiny river relatively, goes south from there. So this conservation area, which I can't quite name, I can't really pronounce it all. It's a fairly new conservation area. I believe that the lodge that we stayed at was instrumental in getting that established. One of the people actually stayed at the lodge with us, it was very much involved in that. It's huge. It's a huge area. 1 million acres were preserved, which is kind of mind-boggling because here in Natick, if we can somehow struggle, we can preserve 5 or 10 acres. There's 1 million acres behind that habitat here. And the main lodge called the Tahoyahua Lodge is where we stayed most of the time. That's right on the edge. And then they opened up a second facility called the Amazon Research Center, which you can stay at as well. So if you go long enough, you can stay a few days there. But it is actually a research center. It's not just a tourist lodge, and there's research going on there. So this is Iquitos, which we've heard about. because there's, you can't go very well far by car in Iquitos, basically to the edge of the city. So there's not a lot of full-size cars, although there are some. Mostly you get around through these little, I don't know what you call them, taxis. They call them putt-putts because it's like a motorcycle with extra wheels on the back. So you get around with those. Somehow we were able to get around pretty well, even though we can't speak Spanish. We learned the numbers, and so we basically got charged the right amount. And that was, I guess, all we needed. And then right in back is the Amazonia Expeditions. The office for our tour company was there on the first floor, and on the second floor they have a tiny bed and breakfast that we stayed at. Basically, just two really nice rooms, and then two smaller rooms for people who are going on to the lodges. So on the bottom picture, you'll see from our window. This is the view from our window down on the Amazon. It's actually a harbor that connects to the Amazon. You can see from our window. And then on the right, from that very location, we went down a whole lot of steps to the water, and there was a speedboat there that would take us to the lodge, about a 2-hour at very fast speeds down the Amazon. So as you go, actually it's up the Amazon technically. So as you go upstream on the Amazon from Iquitos, you pass all of these tiny villages where people live, and they all have their boats to get around. Then we're landing on the top picture. We're landing at the lodge, and then the bottom picture is kind of what the lodge looks like. All these separate rooms connected by walkways. We were rather surprised that there was no land. There was no dry land this time of year. What time of year was it that we were there? I can't quite remember. I believe it was spring, but I can't. Oh, it was my birthday. It was March, of course. So during March is the flooding season, and there was no land to step on at all. So basically, every place we went was by boat, and the lodge is connected by these walkways.
Martin, do you know what the support pillars or footings of those buildings are made of?
I don't. No. Good question. So every time we went on an expedition, it was by either a canoe or a larger boat, depending on where we're going. And the canoes held 2 people. We actually had 5 people with us, and I guess we'll get to a picture of that at some point. So we had our family proper. We had Bev and our son Nathan. Nathan had a girlfriend that came with us, and we also had the woman on the left. Ariel is a niece who happens to be the sister of the nephew that came on the other trip. So she got a chance to do this as well. So basically 2 people plus the driver per boat. We had either 2 or 3 canoes with our group. So going through the right is kind of a typical, boating through the rainforest picture.
So, Martin, did you say kind of 2 passengers plus the tour person who was paddling or steering the boat?
Right. Yeah. You can fit 3 people.
And from that photo you just showed, it looked like they were in the bow. I've always.
That is correct.
It's a little backwards. Unusual. Over here, they'd be in the stern.
Totally backwards, and they paddled differently too. And their paddle was a little shaped differently, which you may see in one of the pictures.
Huh.
But my guess is, and I really don't know this for sure, but I believe canoes originated by the Native, the ones we have originated by the Native Americans in Maine or near us. And the style somehow, because I've seen some, in some museums, some original canoes, basically the same style as we use right today. And it seems as though independently canoes originated. This is, down in Peru is totally, no communication between people in Maine and Peru. They originated differently, so they came up with a different design, but that's just my speculation.
Well, I do remember that there was a lot of navigation through some very leafy areas and areas where branches were coming down, and maybe there were things coming down that we didn't want to touch. So they were going first to make sure that it was safe to get through. So I don't know if that was the indigenous model or if they were doing it to protect the guests.
So these are some of the vegetation that you see that is kind of the jungle vegetation that really is part of all the biodiversity craziness down there. So particularly important is the epiphytes. So that's epiphyte is something that grows on a tree that's not connected to the tree. Here's some on this tree, and then there's a little bit over on the tree on the left, which turned out to be very important habitats. So E.O. Wilson talks a lot about those as totally separate habitats from anything else. Each particular epiphyte has its own animals that live only on there, and in turn, the epiphytes live only on a particular tree. So things are extremely specialized. Then on the left, you see a lot of vines, but there's actually a couple of different kinds of vines. I'm not sure I got all of them in the picture. The typical vine, starts at the bottom and grows up, and those are technically called lianas. And they climb on trees. You have them here as well. And then there's also something, the strangler fig kind of situation. So what happens is animals would put seeds on a branch somewhere where they're going to get a lot of light, a lot more light than they get on the ground, and they start growing like, halfway up the tree, and their roots go from there down. They go down to the ground, root into the ground. That gives them the energy to get much thicker roots, and eventually they strangle the original tree, and the subsidiary plants, take over the original fig tree. So it's kind of a strange model. I'm not sure I got pictures of any of that, but I've seen it.
So when I was there, they had one of those strangler figs, and you could actually climb through the web, if you will, and actually climb. You're inside like this tunnel, if you will, and you can actually climb up the vines that were left over after it had killed the tree that it encircled. It's really
right, exactly. The hole where the original tree is now a hole. It's really weird. So we start seeing all these interesting, unusual wildlife. There's a brush-tailed rat on the left. On top is a sloth. Sloths are really important, and it's hard to actually see them in the wild. You see them in the rescue centers. People love to kind of hold them and pet them, but that's very, very bad because sloths really need to sleep most of the time. They can't really be handled. But there's one in the natural one. There's also down below is one of the strangest creatures, a lantern or a pea-headed fly. So E.O. Wilson, who I told you has a lot to say about rainforests, sort of believes that if scientists just came across one of these, they really would have no idea what category of animal it belongs in. It actually turns out to be an insect, but it doesn't really look like much else in the world. A couple of butterflies. The owl butterfly I kind of like because it kind of looks like an owl. It's kind of cool. And then birds. I just put them all in one slide because I just realized I had so many birds, but many, many colors. A lot of yellows, a lot of blues. The black collared hawk is kind of interesting with its collar. A lot of really cool birds. Then flying birds, tern and osprey, and then another selection of neotropic cormorants. This is a whole group of them. And then this was kind of one of the weirdest ones. It's a type of heron. It's a striated heron. And I just kept watching it, and it kept doing these weird things with its mouth. So apparently it's got that really weird tongue. I asked the guy, what on earth is that? It's its tongue, apparently. And I'm not sure exactly what it's doing, but it's a very strange little creature. And then blue and yellow macaws. Macaws are, of course, a big favorite. You'll see them in zoos all the time, rescue centers. People try to keep them as pets. But really hard to see out in the wild. This is the best we ever did at seeing them stand still. Occasionally we'd see them fly way up in the sky, but this is the closest we saw them to them kind of standing still. A little bit of Photoshop, I was actually able to get the colors to show up here. And then the next sort of indicator species we were looking for was the river dolphin. There's several kinds, and this is called a pink river dolphin.
yes.
Really hard to get this picture. We spent this is a lake that we were swimming in, so you see Nathan in the foreground. We were there for an hour or two, and I kept trying to get pictures, and our guide got into it as well, and he kept taking my camera and trying to get pictures. This is the only picture in 2 hours we got that actually shows the pink color of the dolphin. the dolphin kept popping up where we least expected, when we least expected it. We simply, it was really hard. But anyway, you can kind of see the pink color of the dolphin out there.
I'm glad you mentioned it because I told people about the Pink River dolphin I saw there, and there's like, I said, it looks like Flipper, except, it's pink
Yeah.
lipstick instead of, gray in color. And, there we go.
Did you see,
It was so
did you see
cool.
one as well?
Yeah.
Did you see? Yeah, good, yeah. Then I mentioned we had birthdays to celebrate. I mentioned my birthday, but actually Bev's birthday is the day before, so I don't have, somehow I was taking the pictures, so I got a picture of her birthday, but not mine. Quite a thing there. They love to celebrate. So I must say that every night there was a cake. If it wasn't for somebody's birthday, which it often was, it would be because there was a group that had just arrived, or another group that was just about to leave. So there's always somebody coming. Anyway, there were cakes every night, but it was really nice to have a cake for our birthdays. We have all the guests on the right. We have all the staff on the left. It's really a nice group to be with for birthdays. And you notice the ones that are singing are the ones that are the staff, because they have a Spanish version of a birthday song. So it was one that was kind of a treat to hear, and I couldn't sing along with it. And then finally on the lower right, we get you can see our whole group on this trip. You got me, you got Ariel, our niece, our son's girlfriend in the back, in the middle, our son, and then of course Bev on the right. So unfortunately, around the time of my birthday, I had some minor illness, and I think one of the other people in our group did as well. But actually, that gave us a chance to go to the Esperanza, which is the largest village in the area, where there was a clinic. And this is the clinic that the Angels of the Amazon, which is the affiliated group with our tour company, had set up. And they apologized that the clinic was kind of so rudimentary, which you see in the top. However, they were in the process of building a brand new clinic, which actually they now call a hospital. I'm not sure how big a hospital. And that's under construction in the lower right. And of course, they got their panels, their solar panels, so sitting out there. I don't know, they didn't install them too well, but they have their electricity from the solar panels there. And then the village itself is kind of attractive. You see, it's kind of a little rundown, but on the lower left is a rather basic but rather colorful little hut with all those colorful clothes. And then there's one of the kids out playing in the water.
Martin, what are the roofs made out of? Are those palm fronds, or what are their?
Yeah, some kind of vegetation. And that was true of I think one of the earlier pictures of
Right.
The largest we were in as well. Yeah, so I guess the reeds or the leaves or whatever it is are fairly waterproof.
Martin, just one more question. When I was there, they kind of kept a lot of the kids out of the water because there was something called leishmaniasis, and it was kind of like somehow kind of got through the skin and could have invade their bodies and get in the bloodstream. Do you remember anything about that? Or
I didn't know. I didn't really hear anything about that. I don't know. Yeah, the mother in this case was actually right off camera. She was nearby, so the kid was. But I don't know if there's anything like that. I assume no. For some, actually, I can probably actually predict that it was. The answer is no, because for some reason this Tayayo Lodge is in a real safe area in terms of disease. They told us we didn't need the usual. I forget what you usually need for trips, for travel, for the mosquitoes.
Vaccinations.
Yeah, this particular kind that I forgot. But anyway, we didn't need those for here because those particular mosquitoes just weren't in this area for some reason. So
how are we from mosquitoes? How many miles about? Or
Are you talking about malaria drugs? I mean, malaria for malaria?
Was it malaria? There's
I don't remember. I think there was another one we didn't need that we did need for the first trip, and I'm not remembering.
Yellow fever. How are we from mosquitoes about it?
It could be yellow fever. I don't remember.
Were there any schools that you could see for children?
Yeah, sorry. Here, yeah, this Esperanza had its own school as well. I should have kept put the picture in there. And the Angels of the Amazon does a lot of services to help improve that school. So needless to say, once we got home, we made a donation to Angels of the Amazon. So this is now, we went to the second of the two lodges, the smaller one, the Amazon Research Center. And this, somehow we got a shot of all the boats at one point. This is like, I guess, the central point when everybody's going out on trips. So here are all the boats assembled. So the sign is on the left, Amazon Research Center. The basic layout was similar to the other lodge with a bunch of interconnected buildings. But it really was a research center. So on the top right, this one is known for monkeys. So, you know, the Manu, as I mentioned, is famous for the number of birds. This one is famous for monkeys. It's got one of the largest collections of monkeys that you can see. And they have a grid, a research grid. You see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Basically, they try to mark where they see each monkey at any particular time so they can kind of keep track of their habits. And there were researchers there when we were there as well. So in terms of monkeys, what's that?
Oh, that previous picture of the walkway on the lower left, was that as tilted as it appears, or was that just?
That's interesting. No, it really wasn't. That's an interesting discussion, isn't it? No, it wasn't tilted. I don't know.
Oh, okay, cool.
Came out in the picture. It's funny, no, because the ones in the distance look flat. So I don't know.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, it looks very tilted.
Mm.
It does, but it didn't feel so at the time somehow. So anyway, we were really lucky out in this place. We got 6 different kinds of monkeys that we saw. Pygmy marmoset, which is kind of known, it's famous because it's the smallest monkey in the world, whether old world or new world, very tiny. And they were doing research, there were a group doing research on that. They were concerned about the interaction with tourists. Although we really didn't, you know, I don't think we impinged on their well-being, but I guess they were concerned because these guys are so small, you'd want to get really close. So they were doing research on whether tourists had any negative effect on the creatures. And then we get to the Saki monkeys. Little hard to see. I don't want to insult these guys because they're really nice, but the faces looks kind of ugly to me. That's pretty distinctive. And then on the right, on the upper right, there's one with a baby. It's really kind of hard to see. The baby's just to the upper right of the main face. So I was looking at these pictures at the lodge, down in the dining room. I had my iPad open, and people kept coming by and said, "Oh, Saki monkeys!" Like, you know, usually you walk by people, nobody would know these Saki monkeys, but here, oh yeah, Saki monkeys. And one of the ones who came by was named Malika, Malika Gottstein, I thought was basically just helping out at the lodge, because whenever we had a problem at the lodge, Bev would be talking to her about some problem and she'd help us out with whatever it was. But it turns out she's actually a researcher from Freiburg University in Germany. She's now apparently pretty much full-time at the Amazon Research Center, even though that was 4 years ago. She's still there. And at the time, she wanted copies of all my pictures of Saki monkeys because she's just collecting everything she could find about them. So I gave her copies of everything. And they were trying to determine whether they had at that lodge found a new species of Saki monkey. I'm not sure what they concluded. There's always controversies as to whether something is a species or a subspecies or a variant. So I'm not sure that they ever came to an agreement, but it's kind of mind-boggling when you think of all the species of animals that exist, that they're continually finding new species, not just of insects, but tiny ones that you would expect to find new things, but monkeys, which are pretty much as closely observed as anything can be. So she was doing that, and then only within the last month, she came up with a research paper. She was lead author of a research paper on the feeding of Saki monkeys. And this is an online copy of the research. Her name's right at the top there, and all the research done at the Amazon Research Center where we saw her. So moving on to some other monkeys, these are pretty distinctive, particularly if you look in the lower right, you'll see that they've got those big eyes because they're basically nocturnal. They're only a nocturnal monkey. So they're called night monkeys or owl monkeys. And really cute, I must say. This one, kind of interesting how the names of the monkeys kind of correspond. This one kind of looks like a squirrel monkey. And then there's then this one didn't get a great picture of a titty monkey, but rounds off all the monkeys that I've seen. Okay, and then finally my favorite animal of all time, the woolly monkey. So I hope the video comes out right side up this time, but we'll see. So if you look closely in the upper left, it's kind of hard, but you'll look at the nostrils.
Looks like
So
a human.
It kind of does, yeah. The face looks like a human, but in terms of the nostrils, look at the nostrils. They open up left and right. So there's a subtle difference, which I probably wouldn't have noticed if I had read about it. So the difference between old world monkeys and new world monkeys is that the new world monkeys, the Amazon monkeys, the nostrils are left-right, whereas old world monkeys they kind of are like humans. They open up down, which makes sense because old world monkeys are related to apes and related to humans. So it would be natural that the nostrils would match up like that. But that's one way to tell them apart. Another way, which is not so clear, is in the African monkeys, you think of mandrills and baboons are really colorful, whereas the monkeys here are pretty much gray or brown, kind of dull. And then a third thing that's unique about the monkeys, the New World monkeys, is many of them have what's called prehensile tails, which is tails that can grab onto branches. So in this picture on the right, you'll see them grabbing on with their tail. So they basically have 5 appendages that they can grab onto things with. Actually, the one in the bottom as well, and lets them get around really easily. So these particular monkeys are rescued. They were rescued. In fact, they may be unique in terms of woolly monkeys that have been let back into the wild. There was somebody at a rescue center who told her about this. They hadn't heard of any woolly monkeys that had been released back into the wild. So we got on the top 2 pictures of the mother. At the bottom right is is a child, a baby. And then there's a video on the lower left, and I hope it doesn't go upside down like the other videos. No, I think we're okay with it. So I think you're going to see it move around a little bit. At least you see the camera moving. I think
There he goes.
Oh, there we go. You watch it grab with its tail.
Yeah.
You know, Martin, I thought all monkeys use their tails like that.
No, there's only three groups of monkeys out of the South American monkeys.
It's interesting.
I shouldn't say America, the New World monkeys. Yeah, so there's the woolies, there's the spiders, which of course have really long arms and legs, and then also the other one that we saw, the howler.
I would call this monkey, really, this is so silly of me, but a monkey with a nose job.
Michael Jackson got the idea, so he
Okay. And then here we go, Bev. Here we are at the rescue center, and I wanted to break. As I was trying to show people the things in the wild, and it was just really exciting to see them in the wild. But in terms of getting the personality of the woolly monkeys, I got to go to this rescue center picture. So there's 2 pictures from the rescue center in Manu, and I hope they don't flip when we see them. And then there's one picture of the rescue center in Iquitos. And they're all woolly monkeys. So let's see if we can start with the one on the left, which is Teo. Now it's sideways. Shit, I'm sorry about that. I don't know what it's doing. But anyway, playing around, he's grabbing. And the second, you'll see him hold on just by the tail, if you can kind of imagine if it was right side up.
Darling.
And I think we can't hear the audio, but what somebody commented in the audio is it's just like a little kid, and that's the best
Yeah.
description I've heard. Basically, I mean, 3-year-old child and this monkey are identical. And here's Nathan, our son. Again, I'm sorry, it's sideways.
And Martin, these are in the rescue center because why?
They were injured. They've apparently been captured, maybe as pets or whatever, and somebody didn't want them, or somebody they thought they were illegal. So no doubt the monkey is holding on to Nathan's head, and taking it back the right way. But anyway, if you see this monkey climbing up on Nathan's head, and on the right there's a woolly monkey climbing on Beverly's head. It's a different woolly monkey. 3 years later, a different rescue center 600 miles away. So my scientific conclusion is that this is their natural behavior. What they like to do is play with people.
Yeah, I think that they told us at the first wildlife sanctuary, that they tried to rehabilitate any animals they could into the wild, but that because of the social structure, they weren't able to with these guys. So they became very used to people.
Yeah, so, but they did, but this is it looks like the behavior they adopted was just similar in both cases, which is kind of amazing.
And is the rescue center fenced, or are they, do they stay at the rescue center voluntarily, or are they just kind of held there? Or how does that work?
The first one, I don't recall. I don't think it was fenced in. I think they don't really venture out because they like to be fed. I mean, the second one was an island. It was called Monkey Island. So it was fenced by water, I guess.
Yeah.
But
and
the first,
because they didn't want the monkeys to leave, but basically to protect them from whatever else might.
Right. I was just wondering if the monkeys knew enough to want to stay there, you know, given their ability to climb up anything. It would seem to me if they wanted to leave, they might be able to. That's all I was asking.
I think they were free to climb where they wanted to, but because of the structure of the social networks, they couldn't break into another group.
Yep.
That they wouldn't be accepted. So I think they didn't try to leave.
So it was with their own choice. They thought it was better for them to stay where they were, essentially.
Yeah, I don't know if they gave them the freedom to try.
Yeah.
Or if they just chose to stay there, or if they kept them in some confinement. I mean, when we were there, they were wandering around without any confinement that we could see.
Right. Well, that's what prompted my question, is seeing them wandering around like that.
So yeah, and then we're just going to round up the trip here. This is our everybody in our boat going back to Iquitos. I'm not sure who took the picture because everybody seems to be in it. We got our group.
The monkey, right?
Probably so.
Yeah.
We have our main guide, Juan, our second guide, Eduardo. So somebody took the picture. I'm not sure who, and we're going back.
I know that Nathan had attached his camera to the front of the boat at one point, so maybe he took it remotely.
Really possible. Anyway, this is back in Iquitos. The first picture that we had of Iquitos was dawn on the Amazon. This, I guess, is sunset on the Amazon. Although the name of the restaurant our favorite restaurant was called Dawn on the Amazon, not Sunset, even though we went there at sunset. And we're going to end with a picture at that restaurant. Here we are in our final farewell dinner with our drinks. Some of us have green smoothies and some of them have pisco sour. So pisco sour is the national drink of Peru. And that's the way I wanted to end it. And then that would be it.
Cool.
Marvelous.
Wow. Absolutely fantastic.
Wonderful.
So 2016, 2019, when's your next trip?
I guess we're due for one, aren't we? I have to negotiate with my wife about that.
The politics in Peru have not been the greatest recently, so it's not the best time to go.
That's beautiful.
We had our son and daughter-in-law were going to go to Machu Picchu, and it ended up not working out. They started out down in Patagonia, and we're going to try to hit Machu Picchu on the way back, and I don't remember all the details of why.
I think it's reopened, but for a while it was closed because
Yeah.
everything was shut down because of protests.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, so,
It may be improved now. So if you ever get a chance to get there and you want to find this tour company, the guide was phenomenal. And the tour company was also they gave us their best chef because we had so many different diets.
yeah.
But, and because it was last minute and they wanted to have somebody who could handle it all. And they were amazing.
If you want to put either in the chat or just send an email with a link or reference to that, we can get that out to the full group. That a good resource.
I'll do the link to both of the tour companies. They were different, but both very good.
Yeah. Wow.
Great presentation. Lovely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Any other questions for the Kessels or me?
I'm just curious to know, currently, the climate change is affecting the overall condition of the Amazon rainforest. Is it still deteriorating?
Yeah, well,
Is it climate change or is it just
well,
man?
it's not really. I
Man.
mean, yeah, climate change will affect it ultimately. The main problem is that these renegade people in Brazil are burning it down for very short-term financial gain, and that every time that happens, that contributes to climate change, which contributes to other problems with it. So it just cascades on top of it. Yeah. And I know that this is always there was a terrible government in Brazil that really didn't want to preserve. Now there's a better one, but there are people who just get some short-term financial gain from either growing something which doesn't last long because the soil gets washed away, or trying to graze cattle, which is kind of a stupid use of land.
So one thing you didn't mention was the indigenous tribes in the Manu National Park. The government prohibited people from interacting with them. There was one tribe where the people didn't wear clothes. I don't know, what their history was, but even when they were asking for help, people were not allowed to help them. And there was one man who lived near there who was helping them. He was giving them things that they needed. And he was told by the government he had to stop or he'd be jailed. And he tried to, I think that he spoke the language or somebody he knew could interpret. And he tried to tell them that he would be, put in jail, that they didn't understand the concept. And they said, if you don't keep helping us, we'll kill you. And he couldn't, and they did. They killed him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, well, there's all sorts of levels of interaction. As we did mention, the Machugangas do have contact, and they do get along with the rest of society. But there's also these other groups that have had no contact, or they just have started to contact, but they don't really want. And there's a lot of models that are just haven't been worked out yet.
I think with the tribes that have had more contact with Westerners, or with others outside the national park, then they can ask to be to be part of that world. I don't remember what the process was, but because they've had more contact, they were allowed to. But those that haven't were prevented. They wanted to keep them. They wanted to not interfere with their development. And there are some tribes that they're pretty sure nobody's ever contacted. They can see them from the air.
In the guides, and did they speak Portuguese or Spanish, or what language did your guides?
It's Spanish, because we were in Peru. Brazil is Portuguese, but Peru is Spanish.
Although the natives, I'm not sure what they spoke. There was certainly
The natives spoke a different language.
There were certainly some indigenous languages that people did speak.
Yeah.
The ones that needed to have a lot of contact with the outside world would, of course, speak Spanish, but others would speak their native language.
And I think some of the indigenous languages were related, so they could sort of communicate. And that's how this guy who lived nearby was able to communicate with this tribe. But it was pretty, the government's rule was pretty draconian, and then the reaction of the tribe was even worse. So.
That's interesting. Ooh. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, yeah, Martin and Beverly, thank you so much.
Fascinating.
You really brought us along with you with some of those pictures and the descriptions.
Martin worked really hard on this. I just piped in a few extras.
You just came along on the trip.
Yeah, well, and you let him choose for his 70th birthday, so that was good.
Yeah, I'm waiting for my 75th, I guess.
Yeah.
So I think I'll stop the recording from my end. Maybe Martin has too.
I can do so as well. I think we're done.
Yeah, and so just coming up,